Welcome to the TebZAR Podcast, which is a deeply reflective space where we humanize high achievers through informative conversations and served with the hefty side of wit and laughter. I'm TebZAR. By day, I'm a chartered accountant using insight to hunt for well-calculated opportunities for our clients. And by night, I'm the man behind the mic drawing out stories, lessons, and laughter from South Africa's most exemplary voices in business, media, sport, and the arts. If you feel like life has got you underwater and you're drowning and you're just wondering how others do it, this is the podcast to watch, because the guests we have here will share their stories, and they will share their stories without reservations. On today's podcast, we have Nozipho Tshabalala, who's a conversation strategist, a lady who has done so well for herself. We are very proud, Nozipho, to have you in our very first episode. And Lesego, thank you for pulling this big one off. This is a way to start a podcast like ours. Nozipho, welcome. How are you feeling today?
Oh, thank you so much. Such a beautiful intro. I appreciate it, and I appreciate being the first. That's a first, so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Welcome once again. Nozipho, your story is one of substance, one of grassroots, all the way to the top. And it's a story that every South African girl should be familiar with, because there are just so many lessons to draw from. When you wake up in the morning, what fulfills you?
I love that question, and it's such a big question, right? A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to be part of a fellowship. And one of the things that was landed for me in that fellowship was the difference between success and significance. And, success is like an individual scorecard. It's about you and how you're doing and what you're ticking off in terms of the things that you believe are reflective of your own success. The thing about success is that checklist actually just keeps on growing, because you can imagine that there might have been a time when success was just passing the matric exam. And then that happens, right? And then it's ticked off and it's gone. And then there was a time maybe success was buying a particular car, and then that happens, and then it's ticked off. And the truth is that list actually never ends growing. The biggest challenge, I think, is about transitioning from success to significance. Significance is not about your individual scorecard. It's about people reflecting on the impact you've had on them. People going to bed and saying, my goodness, I'm so grateful that I met Nozi, or I was in the room with Nozi. And ultimately giving significance to your life and your existence. When I think about what keeps me going every morning, is knowing that perhaps today I might actually be significant in somebody else's life. I could potentially do something that is destiny defining for somebody else, that they might go to bed tonight and go, thank goodness Nozi was alive in my lifetime. That is my biggest driver every day.
Fantastic. Guys, as you hear, success is about racking up for your own.
Yep.
But you want to do more for society, because that's where a lot of your fulfillment will come from.
Exactly.
Your background, if you could share light, maybe, starting off as Nozipho the daughter.
Yeah.
If you could give us some color into that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm always so mindful of, the narrative around how we talk about our childhoods, because I never want to glorify poverty, but, the reality is that is my background. My mother was a street vendor. My father worked in shoe factories, and then the textile industry collapsed, and then he became a security guard. And perhaps a story for a later time, but my mother eventually went to school at 48 and matriculated at 50. And by the time she passed, she was a teacher. But for the most part, I am the daughter of a street vendor and a security guard from Pietermaritzburg. I am a big sister, which comes with big sister energy and big sister bullying tendencies that I've had to work my way through. I'm a wife to Rory Tshabalala. I'm a mom to Dilo Tshabalala. I also would describe myself as an academic. I own my nerdship fully. I love studying. I love all things academia. I think if everything else collapsed, I'd probably just be a teacher. But I think the title that most people are used to and reference me by is I'm a conversation strategist, and the first one at that.
At which point in your life did you realize you want to study or do what you want to do in your career?
So education for me was always the only pathway, right? So I never had to make a decision about whether I'm going to university or not. It was kind of predefined that you are. I think the difference in my life was, so what are you going to study? And the background that I had meant that all of this beautiful stuff we did in life orientation class about your strengths and your personality type and what career path, that out the window. The only thing that I had to consider when choosing what to study was what was the cheapest thing in the prospectus. The cheapest thing to study at the University of Pretoria was political science, and that's what I studied. Mm-hmm. And I am also a firm believer that, everything happens for a reason, because I think had I not studied politics, I probably would not be doing the work that I do today. I did political sciences at Tux. I did an honors in international relations. I did my first master's in the UK. I got a scholarship to study in London at the University of London, and I studied international studies and diplomacy. I got trained as a diplomat. I thought that I wanted to be a diplomat. Life happened. I did a second master's a few years later in development finance, and I'm enrolled for my doctorate starting next year.
Fantastic. I think the boundaries that you're pushing forward. These are boundaries that people would push when they're 50 years old. First time they think about a PhD. You're still very far off that. What do you think has been the impetus?
I'm in my 40s. I'm 41.
But it's still a while, a decade. But what do you think? As you said, you own your nerdness and you take pride in it because it has worked for you. But to do a PhD at 40, where do you get the encouragement?
Sure.
Where do you see the value in getting that PhD, and how is that going to help you in your business?
Yeah, I love that question because it takes me back to the story of what is a conversation strategist and what do I mean by that? So I had the fortune of having a really, really interesting but momentous, if that's even an English word, career. I started my first big job. I was working in the presidency. I joined the office of the Deputy President, Dr. Mlambo Ngcuka, as an intern, straight out of university. There's a very, very funny story about how that happened. I hope I get to tell it. From there, I then, when she resigned from office, she invited me to come and lead up a leadership foundation that she had started. So I spent 3 years learning all things about leadership and education in rural schools. From then I got the itch and I really wanted to go into the private sector. I ended up at Tata, which of all things, but
the Indian company.
The Indian company. So I was working between Johannesburg and Mumbai, and it was an incredible experience. And then I got headhunted by CNBC Africa from Tata. So I spent 5 years as a financial broadcaster at CNBC before somebody invited me to come moderate a conversation. And I thought, well, I've never done that before, but actually, let's try it. How different could it be? What I'm doing in studio is I've got auto cue, I've got scripting, I've got a producer in my ear, and now I'm being asked to have a conversation, but in a live setting, without an auto cue, without scripting, and really give the conversation center it and anchor it, right? And I tell you that I moderated once, and I just knew. I'm like, this is the thing that I've got to do. And so for some time, I was quite fearful about resigning from work and following this full time because I had no evidence that this could be done fully. Everybody around me that I could see was using the moderating like a side hustle, like a side gig. It was never like their core job. And I never thought that I could do it differently. But the gift kept on gnawing at me to say, no, you're treating your gift like a gig. You've got to really step into this. And so after just like having an existential crisis and feeling like, okay, this thing is not going away, I need to confront this personal provocation in me, I resigned from my job, I set up a business, and I remember having a conversation with my husband. He was a boyfriend then, and he's like, so what are you going to do? And I said, no, I want to work with smart organizations and smart people who recognize the power of the science and the art of conversation and how that can help us make strategic progress in a range of societal things. And he's like, that's a lot of English. Can you just simplify it? So he says, so you're working with conversation? I said, yes. But he says, you're also talking about the canvas against which you're bringing conversation is strategy. I'm like, absolutely. This is not conversation for conversation's sake. This is about understanding what the strategic challenge is and how does conversation create a pathway of progress in that strategic challenge. So he says, so you're in conversation and strategy? I said, yes. And he says, so what are you? And I said, actually, I'm a conversation strategist. And it was important for me to give that identity a name because I was also tired of people calling me an MC. Because I'm like, guys, I was just at a wedding on the weekend. I am not, I am not an MC. But people didn't have language to describe the work that I was doing. So the first step was actually naming the thing. But the second, and I think far more important step, was being the thing. Right? And for me, the first decision I had to make was not to fall into the trap of making my gift a gig by treating it like a side hustle. And so I set up a business, and all we do is we moderate high impact, high level conversations around the world. We have built over the last decade an incredible track record where we are now the go-to firm for presidential, ministerial, and executive conversations around the world. We count the United Nations agencies as our clients, the World Bank, the IFC, the IMF, the African Union, academic institutions around the world, and of course, big multinationals on the continent. And so it's a really long way of coming back and to say that there's a deep, deep intentionality around the work and how we do it, and then occupying the identity of the thing that you're doing so that you become a tangible example of here is something that could have been in the prospectus when I was looking in 2001. I was in grade 11 at the time, and it wasn't there. And one of the things that I want to do is that if nothing else, I put conversation strategy as a pathway and an option for young people. I didn't know that the sequencing of what I studied would land me here. So when people ask me, what do I need to study to become a conversation strategist? My answer is whatever you want to study. This is not about a singular pathway, but it is about a courage, firstly, to own every aspect of your story, and then to leverage every single one of your experiences to position you as the person who's best suited to hold a particular conversational space.
Those anecdotes you've just shared, those are proper minefield. I think let's just excavate a little. Your time at CNBC, you obviously work in studio. It's a protected environment. Yeah. There's a script. And a lot of what you do is maybe predictable because you've got people around you. You could always say, just cut, let's do this again. Now, you move over to moderate. All of a sudden, you don't have those comforts. Now, you have to be seen. Secondly, you also have to be at peace with the fact that you can make mistakes, and these mistakes, everybody sees these mistakes. Now, before we started the conversation, we were talking about, a lot of people think they fear failure. But it actually starts with fearing being seen.
That's it.
You know, and their light obviously, dims away. When you moved over from CNBC, there was obviously an impetus, and this impetus was something that nags you. It probably couldn't make sense to anybody around you, but you heeded to the call. Are you glad that you did that? and what has it done for you as a person, just being in a space where you are now seen?
So let me take you to a piece of poetry. My favorite poet is a guy called David White. He's Irish. And what David does is that he takes poetry to help us understand the business world, but also how to help understand ourselves in the business world. There's a poem he's written called Sometimes. And in this poem, he says, sometimes you come to a place in your life where the question that has no right to go away, the question that's been patiently waiting for you, basically starts knocking and saying, I'm here. And you've got to now heed the call. I had a sometimes moment. I honestly did. And the thing that I had to listen to was that my next from CNBC was something that was innately a part of me already. I didn't have to go and look outside of me to figure out what happens. This is a gift that I was born with, the ability to communicate, to articulate, to simplify things. Am I glad I responded to the question that had no right to go away? Absolutely. The transition from CNBC to becoming a conversation strategist is for me like the spectrum of conversation that we have. And while I have massive respect for journalists and media platforms in general, I tend to find that conversation is very performative. It's a very structured, very controlled environment. And yes, we don't always have an opportunity to say cut because sometimes it is a live conversation. But as you say, there are those guardrails that ensure that the conversation and its output goes in a particular direction. The transition into the moderated conversation is the opposite side of the spectrum. Here, the expectation is that you are so comfortable to be in service of the conversation that you have the ability to follow the conversation wherever it may take you. So the temptation for performance is just not there. I always say that the biggest impact that I have and the biggest weapon that I bring into a conversation is the question that I ask. In these scripted questions that are written by producers in the broadcast world, in the conversation strategy world, you bring in the question because that is the opportunity to reframe a conversation that might have been going on for decades with no progress. An invitation for us to make cognitive breakthroughs in just how we ask the question and the kind of responses that then elicits and takes the conversation in a particular direction. Who we choose to bring into the conversation in itself is a powerful weapon. We could bring in people that, because they have big fancy titles, because they're the CEO of that and the CEO of this, or we can bring in people with the lived experience of the challenge we're trying to solve for. And that in itself changes the conversation fundamentally. But I think one of the hardest things about the work that I do is what I would just call the so what. So you've had a conversation. How do you know that it's changed anything? How do you know that it's had any impact? And one of the things that I've learned is that conversations, the most powerful conversations, are not the ones that result in these big commitments on stages. They are the ones that actually elicit just a mindset shift in the person that you're speaking to. Because once that mindset shifts, the language of that person changes and how they talk about that issue or talk about that solution. Once they start talking about it differently, that permeates to their intimate circle of people when they go, oh, we didn't know that you think about that. Tell me more. And slowly you begin to see a ripple effect that leads to a broader shift. So patience is the name of the game. There are conversations where symbolically you've got to have the big bang moments. You've got to see a policy outcome. You've got to see a change in strategy. You've got to see a change in a business model because we've had a particular conversation. That's great. But the ones that I know that I go down and I archive at the end of the night as, oh, I'm so glad that I drove that conversation, are the ones where I know that TebZAR is going to have a different conversation from here on because of what we've just done together.
Mm-hmm. And Nozi, as you talk, all I hear is intention, intention, intention. You know, I think a lot of us don't realize the power that we have through spoken word.
Yeah.
We don't speak with intention. And that could be, you know, maybe the reason that we haven't yet appreciated what, you know, conversation can do.
Yeah.
If it's structured, if it's followed up by action.
Yeah.
You know, one of our biggest complaints we've had, maybe as citizens of this country, is we always touted as having the best white papers in the world, the best constitution.
Yeah.
And our English is very good, you know. We put the papers out. But you know, there's a book, The Art of Execution. And, you know, one of the key fundamentals in that book is you have to be detailed. You have to see your plan with as much granularity as possible.
Yeah.
And that will, in essence, help you to execute.
Yeah.
We've fallen short as a country. You know, right now, there's the national dialogue. Everybody's asking, okay, after we've talked, you know, are we going to act?
Yeah.
You know, are we going to see measurable outcomes? In the work that you do as a company, how do you make sure that your clients derive value from these strategic conversations?
Yeah, it's another brilliant question, because not being able to measure makes it difficult for you to quantify and show the value. So we always go in. So I'll give you an example. When we work with corporates, oftentimes we would work both with their internal stakeholders and their external stakeholders. The internal stakeholders are typically the teams. So when a big corporate calls us in and they say, you know, we have a performance issue, and we think that part of the challenge that we have is that maybe people just don't feel like they belong. And we go, okay, so what are the conversations we need to have to get the internal teams to start feeling like they belong, so that they bring their best selves into the place of work, and then that then translates into performance. So the metric we're being held on is, how does our intervention contribute to the overall performance? It's not, did you come in and do a series of conversations? That's not the metric. Did we get people to talk? That's not the metric. The metric is, how does this translate into performance? And that's why we fully embody being conversation strategists. So that's where we start with our clients. You know, people who don't understand the work that I do and oftentimes just think it's about these little snippets of social media, seeing me sitting on conference chairs with important people, think maybe that the work happens on the day. By the time we get to the big conference, sitting on the stage, there's been months, sometimes even a full year of journeying with that client. And so we are able to then confidently look at the metric of performance to see if that's changed. When clients are with the external environment, one of the conversations they might be pushing for is to change a regulator's perspective on a certain issue and therefore change regulation. That's a hard metric. Did the regulation change, yes or no? I'll give you an example. You know, the subsidy in South Africa, the 350 grant subsidy, that's a conversation that we've been part of in the International Labour Organization, not only for South Africa, but for a range of other countries for 10 years. So it's taken us 10 years to be able to say, this is the impact of all of those conversations we've been having over 10 years. And I think it's a discipline we need to get to as a country. But I want to distill the provocation a little bit more. It's easy to talk about things at a national level. You know, as a country, we're not good at this. No, as individuals, we're not always good about follow through. There are too many people, I think, will go to their grave full of ideas because the courage to then execute against those ideas has not been realized. And for me, if there's one thing that I can agitate, and this is why I really loved our conversation before we started, is that we often make the mistake of saying, you know, people don't follow through because they're fearful of failing. And then we come with all these sexy things and we say, fail fast, fail forward, fail whatever. I'm like, guys, wait, back up. Before you can even fail sideways, what you've got to do is to be comfortable with being seen. To actually say, here is my contribution and I'm going to make it. And knowing and being comfortable that you're going to be seen through the lens of what it is you're bringing to the world. That is the thing about being seen. It's about getting comfortable with that nakedness, that you will be seen and accounted for based on the contribution that you're making to the world. And once we're comfortable being seen, then we're going to try a range of different things to bring about the world as we would like to see it. And some of those things might work, some of them might not work. And that's when the mindset to failure actually comes in. Before that, we need to do work about allowing ourselves to contribute our small work in the great work. And I'm going to say that I stole that line from Reverend Victoria Safford. She writes a piece called The Small Work in the Great Work. And I only discovered this last year, but it's been for me like absolutely just riveting. This idea that every single one of us has the opportunity to stand at the gate where history meets hope. What does she mean by that? History is the world as it is. Hope is the world as it could be if you do your small work in the great work, if you contribute to the world what you think the world needs. And if all of us were really comfortable at sitting at that tension and that discomfort of constantly going, how does my work contribute to moving us forward? And what can I do today to help us move in that direction every single day? Who can I talk to? Who can help me amplify this? What work do I need to hold up as evidence to show that this is actually a thing and that it actually works? Imagine if we all did our small work and the great work. I think we would no longer be talking about a country that's good at churning out white papers and policy positions. We would be talking about a country of doers, a productive country, a country of people who execute against their beliefs, and a country whose people rise to their full ambition.
Lovely. I'm converted. You've pioneered the phrase, a conversation strategist. It's almost proprietary.
It is.
To you. Do you see other people, starting to latch on, owning that concept?
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
It's already happening. It gives me great joy. We've just started a journey as the conversation strategist of actually creating a training program where we actually give people the skill, the tools, the know-how that I've amassed over the decade to really give them more than just the name and actually give them the substance and the practicality of what that means. But even before we started rolling out these workshops, people were saying, thank you for finally giving a name to the thing that I know I either am or I'm becoming. And for me, it's not just about, people say copying or mimicry is the greatest form of flattery. I don't need to be flattered. What I do need is to know that I've given people a tangible pathway to becoming something that they feel that they can become. And I think my greatest joy would really be seeing this in the perspectives where a young person can say, actually, I'm not going to study political science because there's something better. I'm going to become a conversation strategist.
Wow. At the risk of flattering you, Nozipho, every piece of marketing collateral that's got comedian next to TebZAR please change it to the humor strategist.
Yes, we love that.
Like I said, I'm very converted already. Nozi, your work, particularly when you work for the presidency, you traveled the world.
Yes.
You traveled the world in your 20s.
Yes.
For people who still have reservations about traveling, especially traveling to other African countries, why should people travel? What does travel do to you that you can't get anywhere else being in South Africa?
Sure. I really hope that community is getting smaller and smaller. I think traveling just opens up your understanding of how big the world is, your sense of possibility. It opens up to you to seeing people and how they live differently, and brings up new ideas about what you can take back home. It also just helps you appreciate home a lot more. I mean, as you said, I've been traveling for close to 20 years, if not more. There's very few places that I really haven't been, and boy, South Africa is amazing. Like, infrastructurally, the food here is amazing.
The vibe with the people.
The vibe, when I'm in the US and I'm like confronted with the food there, I'm like, I can't wait to get home. The vibe, the energy, even with our stuff as people, we're still an awesome bunch of people. And I really just think you get such a great appreciation for humanity when you travel. One of the things that has been a big thing for me is also really trying to learn language. So I've been struggling through French for the last 3 years, because somehow being able to hear another language and to articulate yourself in another language, it almost feels as if you're opening up different compartments in your mind. As a Zulu native speaker, there's certain things that I can't even translate into English, because English doesn't have the breadth to capture what I'm trying to say in Zulu. Now, imagine if you were able to do that with multiple languages. It allows you to grab the world a lot more closer, and to just appreciate and see the world differently. I think I'm on passport number 8.
Sure.
So I really, really think I could not encourage people enough to say, if you have the opportunity, start here. Get out of your province. Go see other parts of the country. And then just go to the borders next door. Go to Namibia, drive to the Kingdom of Eswatini. Go up to Beit Bridge, look at that experience. Go into Zimbabwe, go into Harare, go beyond. And the continent is beautiful, man. Let me say this. I got so humbled as a South African, because I remember, always thinking that the Lion King was inspired by South Africa because of some of the Nguni words in it and so on. Then I went to the Masai Mara in Kenya and stood like at the top of a ridge and looked down and went, okay, the Lion King has got nothing to do with South Africa. The Lion King was inspired by this right here. When you look and you're seeing 100 elephants all at the same time, and like 20 giraffe, and like, 1,000 wildebeest, you begin to realize how absolutely stunning the continent is. 2 weeks ago, I was in Cairo with my husband, and I'd been before, but we went back, and just to be at the pyramids and just not being able to explain how did this happen? When did it happen? How did these people build these structures? It's awe-inspiring. And so travel.
You must. I've had the opportunity to travel Africa quite extensively. I remember in Lusaka, I met up with people who speak a language called Bemba. And as they talked, you could hear snippets of Sizulu.
Absolutely.
And I would say, that's Zulu. They were looking at me saying, okay, where does that come from?
Yeah.
But we are so threaded by maybe remnants of language. But there's something about the African continent that if you have not traveled, you cannot appreciate.
Yeah.
And that level of travel, like you say, when you come back to South Africa, you realize what a piece of heaven we have.
Yeah.
And this is why South Africa, whether on the sporting scene, political scene, we're always a global player. We're there in the conversations. You know, our artists are making big strides. And that potential, as soon as we realize what we have, I think the level of complacency that permeates across a lot of industries is something that, you know, we should, not tolerate.
Sure.
Absolutely. As a citizen, as a people, because we are among the best. And we've shown it time and time again.
Yeah. I mean, I see you're ripping the box today, and I'm very proud of you for that. You know, this thing of complacency is a choice. Just like excellence is a choice, just like corruption is a choice. And I'm going to tell you a story of something that I think just gave me so much hope that maybe we are turning the tide, and maybe we just need to keep at it so that we really are more intentional about just being an excellent people in every facet of our social life. And I've now become the brand ambassador for these guys because this is the Metro Police Department at Waterfall.
Oh, okay.
My driver's license was expired and I was freaking out. I was like, oh my goodness, how did I forget about this? And I was expecting the usual, like I'm going to call, I'm not going to get an appointment, I'm going to be told system offline, and I'm going to start racking up tickets and fines and all of this. I called, I said, no, go online, the system's working. Went online, got an appointment for the next day. I arrived, as I parked, somebody came to the car and greeted me, showed me where to go, called me ma'am. And I was like, am I in the right place? Excuse me, I'm looking for the traffic department. They said, this is exactly where you are. I walked in. It was the most efficient, seamless, service level experience that I've never had in South Africa. I went in, somebody came, took my old license, gave me a printed out copy because I had to fill in my details online already to say, all we need now is your signature. And I needed to change my marital surname. They already had that ready for me. They're just like, all you need now is your signature. Please take a seat. In 10 minutes, I was out. 7 days later, I had a new driver's license. That is all about intentionality and choosing excellence. We do it with the Springboks. We do it on the sporting field. I don't know if you're a Kaizer Chiefs fan, how you feel about that, but I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm hurting too, don't worry. But we choose excellence in the things that are important to us. And when I see that experience at Waterfall and I go, if this is a pocket of excellence, my goodness gracious, imagine if we're able to replicate that across the country. Imagine if going to a public hospital suddenly was that experience. Would we be having this heated debate about the NHS? Nobody would care because we would be getting excellence everywhere. The reason why NHS is just such a contentious issue is because we've decided that in some space we're going to bring the worst version of ourselves. Not even subpar, worse. I mean, and I saw this at the airport last week. I arrived and I cleared customs, and where they're supposed to check whether you've got anything to declare were 4 officers all sitting on their phones looking down. And I just thought to myself, how many people are walking through here, bringing things into South Africa that shouldn't be here while you are posted with your head down on TikTok or whatever else that you... So it's a choice. And so for me, I think everything comes back to the individual. Systemic change is not born systemic. It starts with you. It starts with choosing to be excellent yourself. And then in the way you show up excellently in your way, you are an influence to permeate excellence to the people around you, and to demand excellence from the people around you. And suddenly your circle becomes a ripple effect around other people. But I think that we just need to be intentional and we need to make a choice. Who who do you want to be? In the story of this life, in this role, in this place that you're in, who do you want to be counted as in the story? Who's your character? And what are the traits of the particular character that you're playing? And will you be happy when the story is written to say that you were the one who chose to sit on your phone and look down instead of doing your job?
I'm happy you bring it back to intention again, because for you to be a great person, you actually have to spell it out first. And for us who tend to write from time to time, writing is a very therapeutic process. But once you start writing, your thoughts on paper, it gives you, it's a different type of a mirror. You look at yourself very differently. And that's when at times you realize, I need to do better. And when you talk about choosing excellence, if just half of us were to do that, there would be very little incentive for corruption. Because in my view, corruption happens when people feel, you know what, I can't actually work for this 10 million that I believe should be in the bank account. And therefore, I'm going to take a shortcut. But once the collective psyche says, we choose excellence, you don't have to expose yourself to the possible consequences of corruption. Because you know you will get that 10 million. It might take you a year, it might take you 2 or 3 years. And I think that's one of the messages we need to punt out, because one of the things we see a lot, authenticity takes a back seat to a lot of fluff. And fluff seems to be an industry that drives value propositions that, can't really be measured and tested with accuracy. And this is one of the things, as a dad, I've always said to my girls, earn your stripes. Once you can do for yourself, that is the biggest peace of mind. That's the biggest confidence, because nobody needs to tell you. You're not at the mercy of anybody else. And as South Africans, the battle to corruption, or the battle against corruption, is for us to find value in ourselves as individuals. Believe we can. And this mine, gold mine that we're sitting on as a country, we can really illuminate things once we've passed, those mental barriers.
I think you've said so much that's so powerful there. I want to maybe pause on 2 things. The one is to talk about the mirror that comes with writing, because I think that's quite important. And then maybe just a comment on the collective psyche. So I've just published a book called After the Fires, Unlocking the Power of Letting Go. And the book is all about my personal struggle with always wanting to be in control, and realizing that being control serves me in some moments, but is in complete disservice to me in other moments. And having to really figure out in what moments does this become an important thing to serve me, and in what moments is it keeping me from thriving. And I think the writing process is definitely therapeutic, but to echo your words, it is an absolute mirror. I had to confront the ugly person that I am in my full mode of control. One of the stories I shared at the launch event was, when my mom had passed, my dad and I were in a warehouse full of coffins or caskets. And this was because he didn't like the casket that had come with the burial package. He wanted something better. So I'd never buried somebody in my life. So here we are walking rows and rows looking at these caskets. And my phone rings, and it's one of my aunts, and she says, we just wanted to find out, should we buy the oxtail Norix cubes, or do you want the beef Norix cubes for the curry for the funeral? And I just thought to myself, why am I having to make a decision about Norox while I'm in the middle of choosing a casket? And while I was angry in the moment, the reflection that I had was that because I had positioned myself in the family as the person who makes the ultimate decision on everything. And that ugliness of control was rearing its head and really showing me this is who I am in that moment. And so that mirror also has to then come with a commitment to engaging with the parts of yourself that are not a service to you and not a service to others. And so my book is really about getting to the other side of control and trying to figure out what that looks like now. Don't have all the answers, only the journey about what's gotten me there. I love your comment on the collective psyche, because I think this is the point I think I've been making throughout the conversation, to say it starts with one person changing their perspective and their viewpoints, and the ripple effect then moves to a collective psyche. You know, when I traveled to Rwanda, as an example, that country, April 1994, saw 100,000 people die, murdered, neighbors killing each other in the streets, machetes, people's heads being chopped off. If you go to the museum, you see skulls of babies. That's how absolutely horrific it was. In South Africa, we didn't even pay attention to it because we were so busy welcoming in Nelson Mandela that it was the last thing on our minds that a 3-hour flight away from here was an actual genocide, right? And so if you think about that April 1994 actually means that Rwanda is exactly the same age as us in terms of a democratic transition. Exactly the same. If you ask anyone in Rwanda, which side, were you a Hutu or were you a Tutsi? Every single person will tell you, I'm not a Hutu, I'm not a Tutsi, I'm a Rwandan. That's a collective psyche. What they've achieved is the nation building project that we're still on. We're still trying to figure out what does it mean to live with each other. We call it different names, the Rainbow Nation, the New Dawn, but we're still trying to figure out how do we just live with each other and the pain that we've caused each other. How do we work through that as a country to allow ourselves to be able to then say, I'm just South African. I actually don't care if I'm white or colored or black. I'm actually just, in fact, being South African is more important than being white or black or colored or Indian or anything like that. We're not there yet. Rwanda is. You will not hear a single differentiation. They do not differentiate amongst themselves. And so I think that's just such a powerful example that we have. I'll end off with this. For one of my fellowships, I was a Tutu fellow. I got to go to Oxford Business School. It's called Said Business School. And one of the professors came in to come and deliver a lecture on how to build a nation. And the case study he used was Shaka Zulu. I had to go to Oxford to be reminded that the world's truest and purest example of nation building comes from the place where I was born. And so we're sleeping on ourselves in a lot of ways. And so even now, when Shaka Ilembe is on our screens, it's an invitation to reconnect and remind ourselves who we are and to do the work of the collective psyche and to say, how do we use this broadcast to start new conversations in the country? This is why even the national dialogue, I applaud the intent, because we know that there are unfinished conversations that we need to have as South Africans. But we actually then need to actually do the work so that the outcome that we're looking for is how do we get to that collective psyche where we see ourselves as South Africans, Springboks because when we're in the stadium and the Bokke is playing, does it matter that you're an Indian or a black person or a white person? It matters nothing. The only thing that matters is that you are on the side of green and gold. So we have moments of getting it right. How do we lock in those moments so that they become the vertebral column of how we stand as a nation?
You know, you spoke about Rwanda. I was there a couple of years ago. At the airport, as you get in, they do not allow plastic into their country. Women are walk by themselves 12 at night in the city, and it's safe. And all of this is happening, like you said, 3-hour flight away from here. So we don't even need first world countries to be exemplars, because we've got a fellow African country.
In fact, a lot of these people that we call people of first world countries, I don't think we should be taking examples from what's happening in those parts of the world right now. There's a massive shift in terms of, this idea that the global West used to be the example of everything. And I think there's an invitation, even in this moment, to say, as the world is shifting, we have an opportunity just to reclaim and recenter ourselves and our ways. But then it comes back to, are we being intentional as well? Like, when we talk about Ubuntu, for crying out loud, what does it actually mean in practice? And are we living that? Or are we happy to talk about it to the rest of the world without actually being that? How does gender-based violence happen in a society that believes that you are because I am, and I am because you are? It's a complete disconnect. And so we're also not exercising ownership over the things that we say are reflective of us. We've made Ubuntu a PR exercise that actually has nothing behind it. And so to your comment earlier about fluff, we must call ourselves out for the fluff that we sell ourselves and that we sell to the rest of the world as well, where we've come up with sexy names that we cannot back up with a single ounce of evidenceable action to say, this is how we actually show up in this way.
Nozi, it's been great having you here in our first podcast. Learned a lot today.
Thank you.
Certainly about intention. You've got the book. What's the name of the book? Where can we find it? We'd like to support you through your journey as an author. And we'd like to encourage you to please keep owning, the conversation strategist idea. Keep punting it, because as South Africans, we're a very polarized society. Too few Indian people sit with coloreds. Too few coloreds sit with blacks. Too few blacks sit with white people. And we're missing out on a lot of synergy.
Yeah.
And we'd like to hear also in closing, what's your advice to South Africans?
Sure.
To bridge this polarization that we have, such that we can get to the next tier of growth and to the next tier of vibrancy, because I feel as a country we've lost quite a bit of vibrancy.
Thank you so much. So on the book, we are available nationwide at all exclusive books, at all bargain books, at any bookstore worth its salt. You're going to find us there. We're really excited to be there. We're also online. We're on Take-A-Lot. We're also now on Amazon, so we're now available internationally. The audiobook is also coming out, so we've recorded. We are just waiting to be uploaded in the queue. So we're very excited about that as well. But of course, if anybody struggles, please just let us know. At the Conversation Strategist is our handle, or at The Real Nozi. We're always super responsive and want to make sure we get to as many copies in the hands of people as possible. To the final question of if I had a message for South Africans, I love the fact that we ended off this conversation talking about Rwanda. And I always think the true test of how much we're really opening ourselves as South Africans is by firstly just asking yourself, how many people who are different race to you were in your home this week? Or this month? Let me be fair, this month. I'm not talking about your helper. I'm not talking about your nanny, and I'm talking about your gardener. People who look different to you, who came to break bread with you, who came for a drink, who came to pick up your kids because you and your kids and their kids go to the same school, and so you're building a community with them, who you went to church with and actually connected with, or whatever place of worship that you go into. So before we look at like what's happening in the country, what's happening in your household? How many times do you bring into your space people who look different to you? How many times do you make yourself vulnerable and go to spaces where people who don't look like you are there and be in conversation with them and be intentional about connecting with them? And if that answer is not too often, then I'm sorry to say, but you're perpetuating the problem. And what happens is that this becomes generational. So if your children see only black people in your house, TebZAR, all the time, they begin to socialize in their mind that the only community they have is black people. You get to change that by who you have in your own household. My husband and I are very intentional about that. If nothing else, it's one of the ways in which we want to live as the South Africans I think we could all be, rather than just talk about it.
I must say, I've got a couple of black friends, couple of whites. I'm very thin on Indians and coloreds.
So you need
I'm
new
open
friends.
for friendship. Anybody hears that? Nozi, thank you very much. That was beautiful for the first episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much.